Long, long ago, the world was not like it is today. People had forgotten how to be kind and good. They hurt each other, and they didn't listen to God. The world was noisy with bad things happening everywhere. God watched all of this from heaven and felt very sad. He loved the people so much, but they were not listening to his words anymore. In the middle of all this trouble, there was one man who was different. His name was Noah. Noah loved God with all his heart. He listened to God and tried to live in a way that made God happy. Every day, Noah would talk to God, and God was pleased with him. He was a good man who always tried to do the right thing. One day, God decided it was time to start over because the world was full of too much badness. But he didn't want to lose Noah and his family because Noah was special. God called Noah and said, "Noah, I am going to send a big flood to clean the earth. But don't be afraid. I have a special job for you." Noah listened carefully. He knew that God had an important plan for him. His heart beat fast because he trusted God and was ready to do whatever God asked. Noah didn't know what would happen next, but he was ready to listen. After God spoke to Noah about the big flood, he told Noah the plan. "Noah, I want you to build a big boat," God said. "It's called an ark. The ark will keep you, your family, and the animals safe from the flood." Noah was surprised. He had never built a big boat before. But he trusted God. God gave Noah special instructions on how to build the ark. He told him how long, wide, and tall the ark should be. It was going to be the biggest boat Noah had ever seen. Noah started working right away. He gathered wood and tools, just like God had told him. Day after day, Noah and his sons hammered and sawed, working hard to build the ark. People in the town came by and saw Noah working. They didn't believe a flood was coming, and they laughed at Noah. "What are you doing, Noah? Why are you building such a big boat?" they asked, but Noah didn't listen to them. He kept building the ark just as God had told him. He knew that God had a plan, and Noah wanted to obey. The ark was getting bigger and bigger, and Noah's heart was full of hope. One day, after many weeks of hard work, the ark was finally finished. It was huge and strong, just like God had said it would be. Noah looked at the big boat and smiled. He knew the next part of God's plan was coming. Then, something amazing happened. From all around the land, animals started walking toward the ark. There were lions, elephants, giraffes, birds, and even tiny ants. God had sent them all to Noah. They came in twos, one boy and one girl of each kind. The big animals marched and the small animals scurried, all making their way into the ark. Noah welcomed them inside. The animals were calm, and they seemed to know that the ark would keep them safe. They made their homes inside the big boat, and Noah and his family helped them settle in. It was noisy with all the different animals, but it was a happy noise. Noah's family smiled as they watched the animals enter. God had made sure every kind of animal was safe. Noah was amazed at how God had planned everything so perfectly. Now, the ark was ready, and so were the animals. The next part of the story was about to begin with the animals safely inside the ark. God spoke to Noah again. "Noah, it's time for you and your family to enter the ark. Soon, the rain will come." Noah told his wife, his sons, and their wives to get ready. They packed their things and went inside the ark. Once they were inside, something amazing happened. God himself closed the big door of the ark, sealing Noah, his family, and all the animals inside. It was warm and cozy, and Noah felt safe. They were ready for whatever would happen next. Soon, dark clouds began to fill the sky. Lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. Then, soft raindrops started to fall. At first, the rain was gentle, but then it got stronger and stronger. The rain came down hard, covering the ground, and soon, water was everywhere. Noah and his family watched from inside the ark as the rain kept falling. The world outside was becoming a big ocean, and the ark began to float. God was keeping them safe, just as he had promised. They knew that they could trust him, no matter how much it rained. As the rain poured down, the water kept rising higher and higher. Soon, the hills and trees were all underwater, and the ark was floating on a great ocean. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights without stopping. The world was covered in water, but Noah, his family, and all the animals were safe inside the big ark. Inside the ark, it was cozy and warm. Noah's family took care of the animals, feeding them and making sure they were comfortable. The lions roared, the birds chirped, and the elephants trumpeted, but everyone was safe because God was protecting them. Even though the rain outside was loud and the waves were big, Noah and his family trusted God. They knew he had a plan. They had food to eat, beds to sleep in, and they spent time talking to God every day. Noah would pray, thanking God for keeping them safe during the flood. The days passed slowly, and outside, the world was quiet and still. All that could be seen was water. Noah's family waited patiently, knowing that God would tell them when it was time to leave the ark. After 40 days and 40 nights, the rain finally stopped. Noah listened, and all he could hear was the sound of water gently splashing against the ark. The storm was over, but the world was still covered in water. They couldn't leave the ark yet, so they waited and waited. Noah wanted to know if it was safe to come out, so he decided to send out a bird. He opened the window of the ark and let a little dove fly out into the sky. The dove flew around, but it couldn't find any land, so it came back to the ark. Noah realized that the water was still too high. 7 days later, Noah sent the dove out again. This time, the dove came back with something special, a small olive leaf in its beak. Noah was so happy. The olive leaf meant that the water was going down, and the trees were starting to show again. It was a sign that the earth was getting ready for them. Noah and his family felt hopeful. They thanked God for the olive leaf, knowing it meant they were getting closer to leaving the ark. After many days of waiting, Noah sent the dove out one more time. This time, the dove didn't come back. Noah knew this meant the dove had found a safe place to live. The water had gone down enough for the birds to land. Noah's heart leapt with joy. Dry land was finally appearing. Noah looked out of the ark and saw the tops of mountains starting to peek through the water. The sun was shining brightly, and the earth was slowly drying up. Noah, his family, and all the animals were still waiting inside the ark, but they knew it wouldn't be much longer. God spoke to Noah and said, "Noah, it's almost time to come out of the ark. Be patient just a little while longer." Noah smiled and told his family the good news. They were excited to step outside again, but they knew they had to wait for God's perfect timing. Noah spent his days thanking God and making sure everything was ready for when the time came to leave. Soon, they would all walk on the earth again. Finally, the day came when God told Noah it was time to leave the ark. Noah, his family, and all the animals had been waiting for so long, and now they could step out into the fresh air. The big door of the ark opened, and they all came out, one by one. Noah and his family looked around and saw the new world. The sun was shining, and the sky was blue. The ground was dry, and the plants were starting to grow again. It was a beautiful new beginning. Noah's family and the animals were free to explore the earth and make new homes. Noah was so thankful to God for keeping them safe. The very first thing Noah did was build an altar to thank God. He prayed and said, "Thank you, God, for protecting us and giving us a new start." God was pleased with Noah's prayer, and he made a promise to Noah and to all the earth. God said, "I will never again send a flood to cover the whole earth." Then, God placed a beautiful rainbow in the sky as a sign of his promise. Noah and his family looked up at the rainbow and smiled, knowing that God's love was always with them. The sky was full of colors: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. It was the most beautiful rainbow Noah had ever seen. His family stood with him, staring at the bright colors that stretched across the sky. This rainbow was God's special sign, a promise to Noah and all the people who would come after him. God spoke gently to Noah and said, whenever you see a rainbow in the sky, remember my promise. I will never flood the whole earth again. This rainbow is a sign of my love and care for you and all living things." Noah felt safe and loved. He knew God would always be with them. Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, smiled as they looked at the rainbow. They knew this was the beginning of a new life for their families. They were excited to start planting crops, building homes, and caring for the animals that had been with them in the ark. The rainbow faded slowly from the sky, but Noah and his family would never forget it. They knew that every time a storm came, they could look for the rainbow and remember God's promise of love and safety. As Noah and his family stepped into the fresh new world, everything felt different. The trees were growing tall, the grass was green, and the sky was bright and clear. It was a fresh start for everyone. Noah's family found a good place to settle down. They worked together to build new homes and plant food. Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, were busy helping with the work. They were excited to start their new lives, and they knew that God was with them every step of the way. Noah and his family took care of the animals, too. The lions, birds, cows, and even the tiny ants were happy to explore their new homes on the earth. Each morning, Noah would wake up early, thank God for keeping them safe, and look up at the sky. Even though the rainbow wasn't there every day, he knew it was a sign of God's promise. He told his children and grandchildren about God's goodness and the special promise he made to never flood the earth again. As time passed, Noah's family grew, and they filled the land with joy and love. They worked hard, but they also took time to rest and enjoy the beautiful world God had made for them. Noah's sons began to have children of their own, and soon, the earth was full of happy families. Shem, Ham, and Japheth taught their children everything they had learned from Noah. They told them the story of the ark, the animals, and the big flood. The children loved hearing about how God saved their family. Each day was an adventure. The children would explore the fields, climb trees, and play with the animals. They were curious about everything around them, and Noah loved watching them grow. He would smile and remember the days when the ark was their only home. Now, the world was so big, and there was so much to see. As the families grew, they spread out over the land, finding new places to live. Some went to the mountains, while others settled near rivers and lakes. Wherever they went, they remembered God's promise and told their children to trust in Him always. Even though life was busy and full of new adventures, Noah's family never forgot to thank God for everything He had done. They knew that God's love would always be with them, no matter where they went. As time passed, many people filled the earth, and Noah's grandchildren and great-grandchildren were spread far and wide. They spoke the same language, and they worked together to build new homes and cities. One day, some of the people had a big idea. They wanted to build a huge tower that would reach all the way up to the sky. We want to make a tower so tall that it touches the heavens. They said. Then everyone will know how great we are. The people gathered in a place called Babel and began working together to build the tall tower. They used bricks and worked hard day and night to make the tower bigger and bigger, but something wasn't right. The people were building the tower to make themselves look great, not to honor God. They wanted to show off their own power and forgot that everything good comes from God. As the tower grew taller, they felt proud and started thinking they didn't need God anymore. God was watching from heaven. He saw what the people were doing, and He knew it wasn't good for them. They were becoming proud and not listening to Him. God decided to do something to help them remember what was most important. God saw that the people were building the tall tower in Babel, and He knew that they were forgetting about Him. They were too focused on making themselves great, and their hearts were not listening to God's love. So, God had a special plan to help them. One day, as the people were working on the tower, something amazing happened. Suddenly, they couldn't understand each other. Before, everyone spoke the same language, but now, God gave them many different languages. When one person said, "Pass me a brick," another person couldn't understand. They started talking in different words and couldn't work together anymore. The people became very confused. They couldn't finish building the tower because no one knew what the others were saying. Some people left to find new places to live, while others tried to talk to their neighbors, but it was too hard. Soon, they all spread out across the earth, speaking different languages. God's plan worked. The people stopped building the tower and remembered that they needed God. They learned that it was more important to listen to God and love Him than to build big towers to show off their power. Noah had lived a long and wonderful life. He had seen God's goodness and had watched his family grow. He had trusted God through the big flood, built the ark, and cared for the animals. Now, as an old man, Noah was peaceful and happy. Noah spent his days telling his children and grandchildren about God's love. He reminded them about the rainbow promise and told them to always trust in God's plan. God is always with us, Noah would say. He loves us and will take care of us. Just like He took care of us in the ark. Noah's family listened closely to his stories. They knew he was wise and that he had lived through many amazing things. They wanted to follow his example and live in a way that made God happy. One day, after living for many, many years, Noah passed away. He was surrounded by his family, and they all thanked God for Noah's life. They knew that Noah was now with God, resting in heaven. Noah's story would be told for many generations, reminding everyone of God's love and the special promise He made. Even though Noah had passed away, his story was still alive. His children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren told the story of the ark, the animals, and the rainbow promise. The story traveled from one family to another, and soon, everyone on earth knew about Noah's faith and God's love. Every time a rainbow appeared in the sky, people would smile and remember God's promise. They would point to the rainbow and tell their children, "See that? It's God's promise to us, just like He promised Noah." The people learned that God is always with them, even during the hardest times. They knew that no matter what, they could trust in God's love. The world continued to grow, and families spread across the earth, living their lives and loving each other. And every time they saw a rainbow, they remembered the story of Noah, the man who trusted God, and the great flood that changed the world forever. As the years passed, Noah's family grew even larger. His sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, each had children, and their children had children too. The world was filling up with happy families, all working together to build new homes and start new lives. They lived in different places, but they all remembered the story of Noah and the ark. Every family passed down the story to their children. They would sit around campfires at night, telling about the great flood, the animals marching into the ark, and how God had kept Noah and his family safe. The children listened with wide eyes, imagining the big boat and all the animals inside. Even though the world had grown big, the people knew they were all connected by the same story. They remembered how much God loved them and how He had given them the beautiful rainbow as a promise of peace. The new world was full of hope. The families worked together, shared what they had, and trusted that God would always take care of them, just like He had taken care of Noah and his family. One day, the families decided to gather together for a big celebration. They wanted to thank God for the new world and remember the promise He made to Noah. They built a large fire and brought food from all over, bread, fruits, and vegetables they had grown in their gardens. Everyone was excited to see each other again. The children laughed and played games, while the adults sat together, talking about how much God had blessed them. They remembered the hard times during the flood, but now they were thankful for the new life they had. As the sun began to set, the sky turned pink and purple. Then, as if to join the celebration, a beautiful rainbow appeared in the sky. Everyone stopped what they were doing and looked up. The rainbow stretched across the sky, reminding them of God's promise. Together, they prayed and thanked God for His love and for keeping His promise. They knew that, no matter what happened, God would always be with them. As the night grew darker, the families gathered around the fire. The children snuggled close to their parents, and the adults began telling stories about the old days. They spoke of how Noah had built the ark with his sons, how the animals had come two by two, and how the rain had fallen for 40 days and nights. one of Noah's great-grandchildren stood up and said, "Tell us about the rainbow again." Everyone smiled because they loved hearing about the rainbow. Noah's son Shem began to speak. "The rainbow is a promise from God," he said. "When you see it, remember that God loves us and will never flood the whole earth again." The children looked up at the sky, imagining the first rainbow that Noah had seen. They felt safe and loved, knowing that God was always with them. "We are a part of God's big family," one of the parents said. "Just like Noah's family, we must always trust God and take care of each other." The fire crackled softly as everyone listened to the stories, feeling warm and happy inside. They knew they were part of something special, a story that had started long ago with Noah. As time went on, the story of Noah became even more important to the families. The older generation, like Shem, Ham, and Japheth, were getting older. They knew it was time to pass the story down to the younger ones. "It's your turn to keep the story alive," Shem told his children. The children were excited and proud to take on this responsibility. They listened carefully, learning every part of the story so they could tell it to their children one day. They practiced telling about the ark, the animals, the flood, and the rainbow. "This is more than just a story," Ham said. "It's a reminder that God is always with us." The younger generation promised to carry the story of Noah with them wherever they went. They knew it was an important part of their family and their faith. They wanted to make sure that, even in the future, no one would ever forget how God had saved Noah and his family, and so, the story of Noah lived on, passed from one generation to the next, just like God's promise of love and protection. As the new generation grew up, they began to explore the world around them. They were amazed by the beauty of God's creation. The mountains were tall, the rivers were clear, and the trees were full of fruit. Everywhere they looked, they saw signs of God's handiwork. One of Noah's great-great-grandchildren, a boy named Asa, loved to explore. He would climb hills, swim in lakes, and watch the birds fly overhead. Every time he saw something beautiful, he would think of the rainbow and remember God's promise. One day, Asa came running back to his family, excited. "Look at this flower I found," he said, holding up a colorful blossom. "Isn't it amazing?" His family smiled and agreed. "God's creation is full of wonders," they said. "We must take care of it, just like Noah took care of the animals." Asa nodded, realizing how important it was to protect the earth. He knew that just like God had saved Noah's family, he had given them a beautiful world to live in. Asa promised to always do his best to care for the plants, animals, and everything around him. One day, Asa and his friends were playing in the fields when they saw a little bird with a hurt wing. The poor bird couldn't fly, and it was chirping loudly for help. Asa felt sad for the bird. "We have to help it," he said to his friends. They carefully picked up the bird and brought it back to their families. Asa's father smiled when he saw the children helping the bird. "You are doing just what Noah did," he said. "Noah cared for the animals in the ark, and now it's our turn to care for the creatures around us." Asa and his friends gently bandaged the bird's wing and made a little nest for it to rest in. Every day, they brought food and water to the bird, taking care of it just like Noah had taken care of the animals during the flood. Slowly, the bird's wing healed, and one day, it was able to fly again. The children cheered as the bird flew into the sky, happy and free. Asa felt proud that they had helped one of God's creatures. He realized that caring for the animals and the earth was an important part of God's plan for them. As Asa and his friends grew older, they became more curious about the world around them. They wanted to explore new places and discover all the wonders that God had created. One day, they decided to set off on a journey to see what lay beyond the hills and rivers near their homes. With their parents' blessing, they packed food and water and began their adventure. They walked for days, seeing new animals, tall mountains, and sparkling lakes. Every time they found something amazing, they thanked God for His beautiful creation. One afternoon, they came across a large, peaceful valley. The grass was green, and flowers bloomed everywhere. There were trees full of fruit and birds singing in the sky. Asa looked around and said, "This is such a wonderful place. We should share this with our families." The group decided to bring their families to the valley, where they could all live together in harmony with nature. It reminded them of the fresh new world Noah had stepped into after the flood. A place full of hope and new beginnings. When Asa and his friends returned to their village, they told their families all about the beautiful valley they had found. Everyone was excited to see this new land. They packed their belongings, gathered the animals, and set out on a journey together. When they arrived at the valley, they all agreed that this would be their new home. Working together, they built houses and planted gardens. Just like Noah's family had worked to rebuild the earth after the flood. Asa's family and friends worked hard to make their new home a place of joy and peace. Everyone had a job to do. The children helped by planting seeds, gathering fruit, and caring for the animals. The adults built strong homes and shared meals with one another. Every evening, they would sit together around a fire, talking about God's goodness and the rainbow promise. As they worked and played together, they felt closer to each other and to God. The valley became a place of love, peace, and happiness, where families could grow and thrive. One evening, as the families gathered around the fire in their new valley home, Asa's grandfather began telling the story of Noah again. Noah trusted God and built the ark to save his family and the animals. He said, "And when the rain stopped, God gave us the rainbow as a promise of his love." The children listened closely, even though they had heard the story many times. They loved hearing about Noah's courage and how God had protected him. Asa's grandfather continued, "Just as Noah cared for the animals in the ark, we must care for the world and all the living things in it." Asa smiled, remembering how he had helped the little bird with the hurt wing. He knew his grandfather was right. Caring for the earth was an important way to show love for God. The children promised that they would always remember Noah's story and live by the lessons it taught them. The stars twinkled overhead as the fire crackled softly. And the families felt grateful for the new world they had built together, just as Noah's family had done long ago. Asa's family had settled into the valley, and they had everything they needed: food, water, and happy homes. But Asa wanted to do something special for the future. One day, he and his friends decided to plant a garden that would grow big and strong for the next generation. They gathered seeds from the best fruits and vegetables and found a sunny spot in the valley to plant them. As they dug the soil and placed the seeds in the ground, they talked about how God had given them the earth to take care of. "We are planting these seeds for our children," Asa said. "Just like our parents and grandparents cared for us, we will make sure the future is bright and full of good things." The children watered the garden every day, watching as the seeds began to sprout and grow into strong plants. They knew that one day, their children would enjoy the fruits of their hard work, just as they enjoyed the world that Noah and his family had helped to rebuild. After many months of caring for their garden, the day finally came for Asa and his friends to harvest the fruits and vegetables they had planted. The garden was full of colorful fruits, leafy greens, and delicious vegetables, ready to be picked. The whole valley came together to celebrate the harvest. Asa and his friends felt proud of the food they had grown. Everyone gathered around the garden, picking the ripe fruits and vegetables and preparing a big feast. There were juicy apples, sweet berries, and fresh bread made from the grains they had grown. As the sun set, they all sat together, sharing the food and thanking God for his blessings. Asa's father spoke up, "Just like Noah's family worked hard after the flood, we have worked together to make this valley a place of plenty. We are thankful for the earth and everything God has given us." That night, as they ate and laughed together, the people of the valley felt a deep sense of joy. They knew they were part of God's great plan, and they were excited to see what the future would bring. One evening, as the families were settling down after a long day of work in the valley, dark clouds began to gather in the sky. The wind picked up, and soon, it started to rain heavily. Thunder boomed, and lightning flashed across the sky, making everyone feel a little scared. Asa and his friends ran to their homes, huddling close to their families. The storm was loud, and the rain kept pouring. Asa looked out the window and remembered the story of Noah. "Do you think it will rain for 40 days like in Noah's time?" he asked his father. His father smiled gently and shook his head. "No, Asa," he said. "Remember, God promised never to flood the earth again. The rainbow is his promise, and we can trust him." Asa felt better after hearing his father's words. He knew the storm would pass, and God was still watching over them. The storm raged on through the night, but Asa and his family stayed safe inside their home, trusting in God's promise just like Noah did. When Asa woke up the next morning, the storm was over. The sky was bright and clear. And the sun was shining. The valley looked fresh and clean, as if the rain had washed away all the dust and dirt. Asa stepped outside with his family and took a deep breath of the cool, crisp air. As they walked around the valley, they saw that everything was fine. The trees were still standing, the plants were growing, and the animals were happily playing in the grass. Asa smiled, knowing that God had kept them safe through the storm. Then, as they looked up at the sky, they saw something wonderful, a beautiful rainbow stretching across the heavens. It was the biggest, brightest rainbow Asa had ever seen. The colors were so bright, they almost looked magical. Everyone in the valley gathered to look at the rainbow. They knew it was a reminder of God's promise, and they thanked him for his love and protection. Asa felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that no matter what storms came, God would always be with them. As Asa and his friends grew older, they realized there were many things they still needed to learn. They wanted to help their families even more, so they decided to learn new skills like building, farming, and taking care of the animals. One day, Asa's father took him to the nearby forest to teach him how to gather wood for building. "This is important," his father said. "Just like Noah built the ark, we must learn how to build strong homes for our families." Asa listened carefully, learning how to chop wood and carry it back to the village. Meanwhile, Asa's friends learned how to plant new crops, tend to the animals, and make clothes from the wool of the sheep. They worked hard and were proud of what they were learning. Each skill they mastered made them feel more connected to the world around them and to the story of Noah's family. Asa and his friends realized that working together made their community strong. They were building a future where everyone could live happily, just like Noah's family after the flood. One day, while Asa was practicing his new skills, he noticed that an older man in the village, named Eli, was struggling to carry a large basket of fruit. Without hesitating, Asa ran over to help him. "Let me carry that for you," Asa said with a smile. Eli was grateful for the help and thanked Asa. "You are a good boy, Asa," he said. "Helping others is something that God loves to see. Just as Noah helped his family and the animals, you are showing kindness to others." Asa felt proud that he could help Eli. He realized that helping others, no matter how big or small the task, was one of the most important things he could do. That evening, Asa's parents praised him for his kindness. "Helping others is how we show God's love," his mother said. "It makes the world a better place." From that day on, Asa made sure to help anyone who needed it. Whether it was carrying baskets, planting seeds, or fixing something broken, Asa was always ready to lend a hand. He knew that by helping others, he was honoring God, just like Noah had done. After all the hard work and learning new skills, Asa and his friends decided to organize a special feast to celebrate everything they had accomplished. They wanted to thank God for helping them grow and for the beautiful valley they called home. Everyone in the village was excited for the feast. Asa and his friends gathered fruits, vegetables, and grains they had grown themselves. They baked bread, made fresh juice, and cooked delicious meals for everyone to enjoy. As the sun set, the entire village came together around a big table. There was laughter, music, and the smell of delicious food filling the air. Before they ate, Asa stood up and said a prayer, thanking God for his blessings and for helping them learn and grow. The feast was a joyful celebration, and everyone felt grateful for their community and the world God had given them. Asa knew that just like Noah's family had celebrated after the flood, they too were celebrating God's love and faithfulness. As the village continued to grow, Asa's family made sure that prayer was an important part of their daily life. Every morning and evening, they would gather together to pray and thank God for all the blessings they had. Asa loved these moments of prayer. It made him feel connected to God, just like Noah must have felt during the days of the flood. One day, Asa asked his father, "How do we know God is listening when we pray?" His father smiled and said, "God is always listening, Asa. When we pray, we are talking to Him, and He hears every word." Prayer is how we show our trust in God, just like Noah trusted God to keep his family safe in the ark. Asa felt comforted by his father's words. He began to pray even more, asking God to help him be kind, strong, and wise. He prayed for his family and friends, for the animals and the plants, and for the world God had made. Through prayer, Asa learned that he could talk to God anytime, anywhere. It gave him peace, knowing that God was always there, listening and caring for him. One day, while Asa was exploring the forest near the valley, he met a boy named Eliam. Eliam had come from a distant village and was new to the area. He seemed a little shy, and Asa noticed that he was walking alone. Asa smiled and said, "Hi. My name is Asa. Do you want to explore the forest together?" Eliam's face lit up with a smile, and he nodded eagerly. The two boys walked through the forest, discovering new plants and watching the animals play. They talked about their families, and Asa told Eliam all about the story of Noah and the ark. Eliam was amazed. "I've heard of Noah, but I didn't know the whole story," he said. Asa promised to teach him more about it. As the sun began to set, the boys headed back to the village, now good friends. From that day on, Asa and Eliam did everything together. Asa was happy to have a new friend and to share his love for God's creation and the story of Noah. He knew that God had brought Eliam into his life for a special reason. Asa was excited to introduce Eliam to the rest of the village. That evening, when everyone gathered around the fire, Asa asked his grandfather to tell the story of Noah again. Eliam listened closely, his eyes wide with wonder as he heard about the giant ark, the animals, and the rainbow promise. When the story was finished, Eliam asked, "Does the rainbow really mean that God will never flood the earth again?" Asa's grandfather nodded. "Yes, the rainbow is God's promise to all of us. It reminds us that He loves us and will always take care of us." Eliam smiled. "I'm glad I came here," he said. "Now I know that God is with me, just like He was with Noah." Asa was happy to see his new friend learning about God's love and the promise of the rainbow. From then on, Asa and Eliam would often sit together and talk about the story of Noah. Asa realized that sharing the story was a way to show others how much God cared for them. One afternoon, Asa and Eliam decided to go fishing by the river. They had been fishing before, but today the river seemed rougher than usual. The water rushed by quickly, and the boys hesitated at the edge. Asa's heart began to pound. What if we fall in? He wondered. Eliam, noticing Asa's worry, said, "Let's say a prayer first." So, the boys bowed their heads and prayed for safety and courage. When they finished, Asa felt calmer. He remembered how Noah had trusted God to guide him through the stormy flood, and now he felt he could trust God too. The boys carefully made their way down to the water and began fishing. As they fished, Asa felt peaceful, knowing that God was watching over them, just like He had watched over Noah's family in the ark. By the end of the day, they had caught enough fish to bring back for their families. Asa smiled, thankful for the lesson in trust and the reminder that God is always with them, even during scary times. As the village grew, there were always new things to do. One day, the elders of the village asked Asa and Eliam to help with a special project, building a new well so everyone could have fresh water. The boys were excited to help with such an important task. Together with the other villagers, they dug deep into the ground, working hard under the sun. It was tough work, but Asa remembered how Noah had worked for many years to build the ark. He knew that sometimes important things took time and effort. After many days of digging, they finally reached fresh, clean water. Everyone cheered. Asa and Eliam felt proud to have helped the village. The new well would provide water for all the families. Just like the ark had provided safety for Noah's family and the animals, that evening, as they gathered around the well, Asa's father said, "Just as Noah's family worked together to rebuild the earth, we too must work together to take care of our community." Asa smiled, knowing that by helping, he was following in Noah's footsteps. One day, a traveler arrived in the valley. He had come from a faraway land and was eager to learn about the people living there. The villagers welcomed him with open arms, and the traveler was impressed by how kind and helpful everyone was. The traveler asked Asa, "What makes your village so special? Everyone here is so kind and peaceful." Asa thought for a moment and said, "It's because we trust in God and follow the lessons we've learned from Noah's story. We help each other, care for the earth, and remember God's promise." The traveler was curious and asked Asa to tell him more about Noah. So, Asa shared the story, from the building of the ark to the rainbow promise. The traveler listened carefully and was amazed by the power of the story. Before he left, the traveler thanked Asa and said, "Your story of Noah has touched my heart. I will carry it with me wherever I go." Asa felt happy knowing that Noah's story would now travel to even more places. Spreading God's love and promise. As more families arrived in the valley, the villagers realized they needed to build more homes. Asa and Eliam wanted to help, so they offered to gather wood from the forest and carry it back to the builders. The boys worked hard, chopping wood and hauling it back to the village. As they worked, Asa thought about how Noah had spent so many years building the ark, piece by piece. He realized that building something important takes patience and teamwork. After several days of hard work, the new homes were ready. The families moved in, grateful for the warm, safe houses. Asa felt proud to have been a part of something so important. He knew that by helping build homes for others, he was showing God's love in a special way. That night, the villagers celebrated their new homes with a feast. They thanked God for blessing their community and for giving them the strength to work together, just like Noah's family had done after the flood. Weeks later, the sky began to darken, and soon, rain started to fall gently over the valley. Asa and Eliam watched from their homes as the rain soaked the earth. It wasn't a stormy rain, but a soft, peaceful one that made the plants grow strong. As the rain continued, the valley turned even greener. Flowers bloomed, and the rivers flowed with fresh water. Asa's mother smiled and said, "Rain is a gift from God. It helps everything grow and reminds us of His care for the earth." Asa loved the rain. He and Eliam splashed in the puddles, laughing and having fun. The rain didn't scare them because they remembered God's promise, the rainbow. They knew that God would never send a flood again. As the rain slowed and the sun came out, a beautiful rainbow appeared in the sky. Everyone in the valley looked up and smiled, reminded once again of God's love and the promise He had made to Noah. One evening, after a day of rain, the villagers gathered by the fire. Asa's mother brought out a small wooden harp, and the villagers began to sing. The music filled the air, and everyone felt joyful as they sang songs of praise to God. Eliam leaned over and whispered to Asa, "Do you think Noah's family sang songs like this in the ark?" Asa smiled and nodded. "I think they did. Music is a way to thank God for everything He's done for us." As the music played, Asa felt a sense of peace. The songs told the story of Noah and the flood, the ark, and the rainbow promise. It was a beautiful way to remember God's love and faithfulness. From that night on, singing became an important part of the village's gatherings. Music helped everyone feel connected to God and to each other. Just like Noah's family must have felt as they journeyed through the flood and into a new world. One morning, Asa and Eliam were walking through the fields with Asa's father. They stopped by a large basket full of tiny seeds. "Today, we are planting new crops," Asa's father said. "These seeds may be small, but one day, they will grow into big plants that will feed our village." Asa and Eliam each took a handful of seeds and began planting them in the soil. As they worked, Asa's father explained, "Just like Noah trusted God to take care of his family and the animals, we trust God to help these seeds grow. It takes patience, but soon, we will see the fruits of our labor." The boys carefully placed each seed in the ground, covering it with soil and watering it gently. Asa thought about how something so tiny could become something so big. It reminded him of the story of Noah, how one man's obedience to God had saved the entire world. By the end of the day, the fields were full of newly planted seeds. Asa and Eliam felt proud, knowing they were helping to grow food that would feed the village for months to come. As the days passed, Asa and Eliam would visit the fields every day to check on the seeds they had planted. At first, nothing seemed to be happening, and the boys began to wonder if their hard work would pay off. "Do you think the seeds are growing?" Eliam asked. Asa nodded. "I think we just have to wait. It's like when Noah had to wait for the rain to stop. He didn't see it right away, but he trusted that God would keep his promise." One morning, after a light rain had fallen, Asa and Eliam rushed to the fields. To their delight, they saw tiny green sprouts poking through the soil. The seeds were finally growing. The boys ran back to the village, excited to tell everyone the good news. Asa's father smiled when he heard the boys' report. "This is just the beginning," he said. "With time and care, those little sprouts will grow into strong plants. Just like Noah had to wait for the waters to go down, we have to wait for the harvest." As the weeks passed, the tiny sprouts in the fields grew taller and stronger. Asa and Eliam would visit the fields every day, watching as the plants became big and healthy. The village was filled with excitement as the time for the harvest drew near. One afternoon, Asa's father gathered the villagers together. "We will soon be ready to harvest the crops," he said. "But remember, this is all possible because of God's blessing. Just as Noah's family was blessed with a new beginning after the flood, we are blessed with this abundant harvest." Asa and Eliam couldn't wait to help with the harvest. They had worked so hard planting the seeds, and now they were ready to see the fruits of their labor. The fields were filled with grains, fruits, and vegetables, enough to feed the entire village. The boys knew that this harvest was a gift from God, just like the rainbow that reminded them of his promise. They were grateful for the opportunity to be part of something so important. The day of the harvest finally arrived. The whole village came together to gather the crops. Asa and Eliam worked side by side with their families, carefully picking the fruits and vegetables and placing them in baskets. There was laughter and joy as everyone worked together. Asa's father smiled proudly as he watched the boys. "This harvest reminds me of how Noah's family gathered food to store on the ark," he said. "They worked hard and trusted God to provide for them, just as we are doing now." As the sun began to set, the villagers sat down to enjoy a meal made from the fresh crops they had harvested. The food was delicious, and everyone felt grateful for the abundance that God had provided. After the meal, Asa looked up at the sky. The stars twinkled above, and he felt a deep sense of peace. He knew that, just like Noah, they were part of God's great plan. The harvest was a reminder that when they trusted in God, He would always take care of them. To celebrate the successful harvest, the village decided to hold a special feast. Asa and Eliam were excited to help prepare for the event. They gathered fruits, vegetables, and grains from the fields, and the whole village worked together to cook a grand meal. Asa's mother made fresh bread, while Eliam's family prepared delicious stews and roasted vegetables. The children helped set up long tables, decorating them with flowers from the fields. There was excitement in the air as everyone prepared for the celebration. When the feast was ready, the villagers gathered around the tables. Asa's father stood up and said a prayer of thanks. Just as Noah thanked God after the flood, we too give thanks for his blessings. This harvest is a reminder of God's love and faithfulness. Asa looked around at the smiling faces of his family and friends. He knew that this feast was more than just a celebration of the harvest, it was a celebration of God's goodness. The food was delicious, the music was joyful, and the evening was filled with laughter and gratitude. After the feast, Asa and Eliam continued to learn new skills from their families. One day, Asa's grandfather called the boys over and said, "It's time for you to learn something very important, how to make tools." The boys were excited. Asa's grandfather explained that making tools was a skill that had been passed down for generations. Even Noah would have needed tools to build the ark, he said. Tools help us create, build, and take care of the things around us. Asa and Eliam watched closely as Asa's grandfather showed them how to shape wood and stone into useful tools. They practiced using hammers and chisels, carefully following his instructions. It took patience, but the boys were determined to learn. By the end of the day, Asa and Eliam had made their very own wooden hammers. They felt proud of their work and excited to use their new tools to help the village. Asa realized that learning new skills was another way to follow in Noah's footsteps. With their new tools in hand, Asa and Eliam decided to help build something special for the village, a new shelter for the animals. The village had many animals, including sheep, goats, and chickens, and they needed a safe place to rest. Asa's father and the other men in the village helped the boys plan the shelter. They gathered wood from the forest and began building the structure. Asa and Eliam worked hard, using the hammers they had made to help put the pieces together. As they worked, Asa thought about how Noah had built the ark to protect the animals during the flood. Now, he was building a shelter to protect the village's animals. It made him feel connected to Noah and the story they had learned. By the end of the week, the shelter was finished. The animals had a warm, safe place to sleep, and Asa and Eliam felt proud of the work they had done. The whole village celebrated, knowing that their animals were now well cared for. One day, while playing by the river, Asa and Eliam saw a young girl named Miriam crying. She had dropped her basket of berries, and they had all spilled into the water. "Don't worry, Miriam," Asa said gently. "We'll help you gather more berries." The boys helped Miriam find a new patch of berries, and together, they filled her basket again. Miriam's tears turned into a smile, and she thanked the boys for their kindness. Asa's heart felt warm, knowing that they had helped someone in need. Asa's father later told him, "Kindness is one of the most important lessons we can learn." Just as Noah cared for the animals and his family, we are called to care for others. Asa nodded, realizing that small acts of kindness could make a big difference. From that day on, Asa and Eliam made it their mission to help others whenever they could. Whether it was helping someone carry a heavy load or offering a kind word, they knew that showing kindness was one way to live out God's love. Asa was always full of energy, and sometimes, he found it hard to wait for things to happen. One afternoon, while fishing by the river with Eliam, he grew frustrated because the fish weren't biting. "Why is it taking so long?" Asa groaned. Eliam smiled and said, "Remember what your father told us? Patience is important. It's like when Noah had to wait for the floodwaters to go down. He didn't rush. He trusted God's timing." Asa thought about that and realized his friend was right. He took a deep breath and decided to be patient. A few minutes later, he felt a tug on his fishing line. He had caught a big fish. That day, Asa learned that patience was a gift. Sometimes, waiting was hard, but trusting in God's timing always led to good things. He thanked God for the lesson and for helping him catch the fish.